Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Volquest podcast, presented as always by our friends Exterior Home Solutions, local and trusted since 1999. A free estimate today. You can give them a call at 865-524-5888 or visit Exterior Home Solutions online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. I'm Eric Kane alongside Austin Price and Brent Hubbs. A lot to discuss here at the beginning of the week. But first, quickly off the top, a couple days to let it settle in. Brent Hubbs, Tennessee going to the Citrus Bowl. First time since 2002. Will take on an Iowa club that, in my opinion, Tennessee matches up well against. Great defense, not so much offensively.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, around the Tennessee program excited. Of course, there's a lot of ties to Orlando with the number of coaches that were down there at UCF that came with Josh Heupel. So a lot of family going to go get to see their friends. A lot of kids going to go get to see their buddies that they went to school with. So from a personal standpoint, there's a lot there that a lot of people like. I think Austin, for a lot of the players, it's something new. It's something different, which is not a bad thing as well. And an opportunity for some young guys, depending on how Coach Heupel and his staff play it, against what looks on the surface like it should be a solid matchup for Tennessee, an Iowa team that's good on defense, struggles on offense, and hasn't played the greatest schedule in the year in the world.
Yeah, I mean they're 10-2. They've won 10 football games. So if you're Josh Heupel and you can find a way to win this football game, you had another win over a 10-win team. You've gotten to 9 wins and 20 in the last 2 years, so it's an average of 10. But this is an Iowa team that you said has not played a great schedule. Why? Because the Big Ten has their conference so lopsided. Now that'll change going forward with, Oregon and Washington and the UCLA and USC coming in. But, for the last few years, that Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa side of the conference has always kind of been just kind of like the Big Ten championship game is always kind of a dud because, they don't ever end up with like 2 heavyweights and they're battling it out. There is no Alabama, Georgia in the Big Ten. No. So Iowa's a team that, again, has won 10 games, but they're by no means your normal 10-win team. And if Tennessee can score it all, you'd have to like their chances because Iowa, when they do win, they win it in a low-scoring, as Mark Packer would call it, a rock fight.
And the Big Ten they're ditching divisions as well, correct? I mean, once conference expansion happens, so again, that you won't see the lopsided championship games in that conference. But Brent, I would say that if Tennessee gets this win in the bowl game against Iowa, this would be kind of the signature win of the season, right? And again, we've talked about it. This is, a win or a loss will not take away from what your season already was. But when you look at the wins on the schedule for Tennessee, last year you had LSU, you had Alabama, you had Florida. This year you don't really have anything. This will still be a pretty good win to end the year.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a bell cow. And I don't know that any Tennessee fan would see an Iowa win as a bell cow win. I think that would be another game that you were playing where you're a favorite. I think most people are expecting you to win. And so I think people would view it as you went and got a good favorable matchup in a bowl game and took care of business and did what you needed to do. And I think that's the judgment of this season. I think when you look back on this year, if Tennessee is able to beat Iowa in the bowl game, Austin, I think the judgment of this is they won the ones they were supposed to win. They won a toss-up or two, and then they lost half their toss-ups. They went 50-50 in toss-up games. Because I don't think many people expected them to beat Alabama and Georgia. So then you had the couple other toss-up games. Kentucky's won. They won that as a toss-up game. Missouri, they didn't win. A&M, they didn't win. Or they did win. And Florida, they didn't. So they kind of split the toss-up games, and that's where you're at 8-4.
100%. And, again, I think when you look back at this season, they'll see it as a transitional year, which is probably what it always was. You hope to – you'd love to have that Florida game back. That's the one that just continually just bites you in the butt. Otherwise, you lost, 3 teams that were ranked in the top 10 in the CFP rankings. I mean, like nobody's going to sneeze at that. I mean, I get, people want to make fun of Missouri or Drinkowitz or whatever, but literally, if they can play any kind of defense at home against LSU, they win that game. They're 11-1, and they pushed Georgia and Athens.
Yeah,
and they're a pretty good football team. And
let me say this for Eli Drinkowitz. I think he's kind of kooky and awkward, but his Connor Stallions line on national television was pretty good. I think we all had to get a chuckle out of that one, right?
He got Reese Davis good because Reese Davis didn't know what to do. And he's the one on camera. I mean, I'm sure like the other guys are like, man, I'm glad I wasn't on camera for that because they were in stitches over there.
So Eli's batting what 1 for 20 in that regard in terms of jokes that weren't really. I mean,
matter.
that was a good one. I'm with you there.
Okay, and if the one is good enough,
yeah,
it erases the other 19. If the one is that great, it erases the other 19.
And that one was good.
It was, man.
It was fantastic.
And I mean, he's obviously done a really good job this year with Missouri. And again, this is more of an offseason subject, but it's the way you lost these games. Second half collapses at Alabama. Second quarter, Florida didn't show up against Missouri. Just kind of is what it is. But at the end of the day, also you said it on our little reaction video the other day. It's if you would have said Tennessee was 9-3 into the Citrus Bowl this year, you would have signed up for that every single day of the week. Turns out you were 8-4, still going to the Citrus Bowl. And again, it's a nice little reward and a chance to end the season on a high note that is kind of a transition year.
I mean, you go back, Hubbard. I mean, there are certain bowl games that Tennessee went to a few times or a handful of times, over the years, and they have not been back to in a long time. The Citrus Bowl was one of them. I mean, for all the jokes about you can't spell citrus without UT and all that stuff, like Tennessee hadn't been there since the 0-2 game, so the 0-1 season. Tennessee's not been to the Sugar Bowl since 1991. Like, I mean, there are certain games where I think Tennessee fans are like, oh, man, I've not been there in a while. Let's go. Now, Orlando's a little different because enough families go to Disney and Universal and such. But still, I think this is one that Tennessee fans can kind of get behind. I think they probably wish they had a little bit different opponent just because Iowa plays such an off-brand of football. Offensively, they're just, not very dynamic at all. But, hey, again, as you said to begin with, Hubbard, and Eric too, like Tennessee has got a real opportunity. The matchup favors them. If they can come out and play their best football, I don't think Iowa can beat them.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think that it's where it's supposed to be. I'm not criticizing any fan or anything like that because, Tennessee, the Florida game and all those things. But I mean, what a difference 3 years have made. I mean, you go back 3 years, Tennessee would have crawled to Orlando to be in this bowl game, right? And so it's a credit to what this staff and this program has done in a short period of time. And it's also part of because of what you did last year that this feels like it's a bit of a disappointment. Had you done this in reverse, right? Had you went Music City, Citrus to the Orange Bowl, the whole vibe is totally different, right? Yeah. It's like Tennessee's a playoff team next year. Now it's like, oh, they took a step back. Yeah, it's a transition year. They gave a game away that they shouldn't have given away when you look at the roster and where they are. But I don't think that this is a year that everybody should just throw their hands up in disgust and say, man, this was terrible. It wasn't what you had hoped overall, but it's still a solid year in year 3 as you build forward. Now, the question is, how do you build off of this? And how do you build out of this game? I think that's the biggest storyline with this game, Eric, is how does Tennessee approach it and how do they build in this game? Is it going to be about youth? And I'm not saying shelf the seniors. I'm not saying shelf the old players. They deserve to have their opportunities and play in this game. But how much do you let this be about youth so that you can set a stage for yourself moving forward? Because I think that's what non-playoff bowl games have morphed themselves into and should morph themselves into.
Yeah, and depending on what this roster looks like next month, with players going to the transfer portal and COVID seniors electing will they play, won't they play, NFL opt-outs, it very well could be in certain positions, but a lot of use, and that kind of transitions us into our next little segment here. I mean, the transfer portal is officially open. At the time of this recording, of course, it's going to be a mile a minute. Got to keep the head on the swivel. But you have 3 defensive backs who have already entered the portal: Brandon Turnage and Jack Luttrell, Warren Burrell. So again, to your point, Hubbard, like a guy like Ricky Gibson could potentially see a whole lot of snaps in this game because you're automatically down, Austin, two cornerbacks.
Yeah, I mean, any better? I mean, like I think you want to see Christian Conner get some run. You want to see Jordan Matthews get some run. And I don't even mean in the game. I think sure if you get up big, you do that. I think ultimately you won't see them just go some wholesale youth movement, but you really want to spend the next handful of practices in bowl prep really kind of getting a jump start on spring practice, because listen, if the Jordan Matthews and Christian Conyers and those top players are not helping you in 2024, then that's not good as far as like the depth, the quality depth, the future, because I think you've got to start transitioning. You can't just be a bunch of old guys out there, a bunch of fifth and sixth year guys out there. I think it's important to get John Slaughter some run. It's important, to get Cam Selden some run. Now, see, like that running back position is interesting for me, guys, because Jalen Wright is going to announce he's going to go to the NFL here soon. And Jabari Small, I think, is not going to put. I think he's going to opt out of the bowl game, and we'll see what he decides, whether that's to go take a shot at pro ball or transfer somewhere else. Which means that Cam Selden, right, is going to get some real run in this game behind Dylan Sampson. That's an interesting one. What does Joe elect to do? Does Joe elect to play? I don't think it's a lay down that Joe Milton plays in this game.
Even if it's hometown, AP.
I don't think it's a lay down. Again, it's kind of like I've been saying about Cooper. Like, I don't think it's a lay down that Cooper Mays is just back. Like, I think it trends that way, but I don't think it's a lay down that Joe Milton is going to play in this bowl game. I think that we might get the start of the Nico era. We'll see. Again, I think that Joe's got to make that decision for himself, and I think the coaches would love to know that decision, in the next few days. But I think this is a decision that bears watching over the next week and a half.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting at a lot of positions, and it's not just about guys opting out or guys going, but like a guy who's not healthy. Does he think, hey, I need to get well? And a guy like Gabe Judy Lally, what's he going to do? He's been bothered by his shoulder. Does he need how much time off does he need to help his shoulder to where he wants to get to go? I think there's some guys like that bear watching in this thing too. So what this team looks like, Eric, in this matchup against Iowa is going to be fascinating. I don't think Iowa's going to have many opt-outs. I think Iowa, what you see out of Iowa is probably what you're going to get out of Iowa for the most part. I think Tennessee could look very different on both sides of the ball, depending on the decisions some guys make here.
Yeah, I think so too. And Josh Heupel was kind of asked about that in his press conference the other day via Zoom when they announced the bowl destinations, kind of like, how quickly do you need to know? And he kind of danced around it a little bit and said, well, I mean, it's a day-by-day thing. They're getting back information. He was very supportive, but I mean, essentially, he didn't really have an answer for that. But practice is starting, right now. They've got, 15 practices, and a couple of those are going to be this week. They had a couple of young guys get some work in last week. So you'd like to have a really good idea of who your team's going to be that you're going to be suiting up and playing with. Again, 4 players at the time of this recording, into the portal already. Brent or Austin, not to say like, all right, watch for this name or this name. You can if you want, but there are going to be some more defectors to the transfer portal, probably some young guys who were buried on this depth chart. I think we're going to see a couple more as the week goes on, and that shouldn't be a shock.
No, it shouldn't. Again, like, I think that every team in college football has got to have some attrition to it. No offense to Warren Burrell or Brandon Turnage, those are great kids, but if they're not going to be your starters, and I don't believe they were going to be, keeping them around as backups, to me, only stunts the growth of some younger players who need to be ascending into that spot. And if you're a coach, you want to be respectful of those older guys. They've kind of, they've been there for you. They've done it the right way. But hey, if you guys, want to go play somewhere, probably is best that, you take a look around, because you're probably not going to play as much here next year. You were being respectful to those older veterans. So, this is a team that's kind of trying to find their way, Hubbard, as far as balancing, keeping some of the old vets and yet pushing some of the new youth.
Yeah, and I think that's hard for coaches in general around the country, because I think the mindset of the coach is, I want everyone. I want all of them. I don't want to lose anybody. Let's find a way to keep them all. Coach, you're talking about losing a guy who's a 3-year veteran, and well, we can't lose that. He's got experience, Well, coach, if you don't do that, you may lose this young guy. We can't lose that. He's got a lot of talent. I think this is hard for coaches. And I think Tennessee is in a place that's different than a lot of other schools, because they have the 20 COVID guys out there. There's not a ton of schools out there that have this many guys who could make a decision to come back. So Tennessee, who was an older team this year with a big gap, right? It was a bunch of young first and second year players, and then a bunch of 4th-year players. fifth-year players. Now they may be a bunch of fifth and sixth-year players and second-year players. So I think that's an interesting situation that Josh Heupel and the staff is in to figure out, AP, exactly what you do, how you manage that. I think I don't know that there's many college head coaches prepared to manage this part of it, which is why most NFL coaches aren't good GMs, right? This is hard.
Well, it is. I mean, because you're right. They want to keep them all. I mean, it's like I take my kids trick or treating, and at some place, you just reach in the bucket, and you get what you want, right? And then there's some places inevitably that the little old lady's like got a Reese cup, a Kit Kat, and a Twix, and she's like, "Now you all pick which one you want." Well, my kids like all three, so they're like, "Well, I want them all," and that's kind of how this is. I mean, like coaches, they don't want to lose anybody, because even the guys they don't think are going to be starters, they're like, you know,
But it could be, right?
be,
You can twist an ankle, you get this.
injury.
Yeah.
There's an
Options.
injury. I mean, no, you can't be that way. Like you to me, it's kind of like if like Tennessee had, okay, let's go with the safeties. Like if I'm Tennessee, like I bring one older safety back and then I'm pushing a younger one to be the starter, right? Like I'm not keeping everybody and keeping the young kid with talent buried. Makes no sense. And all you're going to do is cause dissension if you bring back the older guys and then the younger guy passes them by, and then you end up with an older guy that's pouting and all that stuff that you see from time to time.
Yeah, it's not easy, Eric. It's just not. I mean, for coaches right now, this is a really hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to manage because you do have so many options out there, right? I mean, there's some high school kids, you have your young players and you have portal guys, right? And that portal guy is a dangling carrot, right? Hey, there's an experienced guy. I can go pluck. Can I go pluck one of these guys and bring them in here? And there's been enough portal success around the country with guys that right now the portal thing is, I mean, everybody's talking about Florida State, right? Now, not about the playoff level, but I'm talking about what their roster looks like and how different they are because of what the portal meant. So what does every fan think out there? Let's go the Florida State route. You got to have the splash guys. You got to have the impact guys. Coaches got to figure out a way to manage all of that, which is not easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many scholarships to be had, and if you're at Tennessee, I mean, you're docking a couple because of the past coaching regime. So you want to have all the options. As a coach, it's just what everybody wants. You want to have the option to play these young guys because or these old guys because where they're going to be.
You can have too many options. Yeah. These guys can have too many options.
It's like going to the Cheesecake Factory. Too many options on the menu, man.
You can get yourself in trouble.
You've seen that. They were going to play the two safeties each of the last 2 years, but I mean, you've seen that in cornerback a couple of times. Like really, the last couple of years, you've had so many different options. It's like we'll just pick two. So I just think coaches like to have that option. But I agree, too many options can be a bad thing, and it could stunt the growth of your young guys that need to be getting those reps. More on COVID seniors. Some notes on some COVID seniors that could be making their way back to Rocky Top, plus some targets in the transfer portal. All that and more coming up next right here on the Volquest podcast. But first, a quick word from our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
It's one of those phone calls that you hate to get from your kids. Hey, Dad, a tree fell on my house. Well, we got that call a couple of weeks back from our daughter at her house here, and the first call that I made was to Exterior Home Solutions. The peace of mind that they gave me and us as a family when they came out here and came up with a plan, got us connected with the right people, is absolutely priceless. Use the same people that I use. In that time of need, Exterior Home Solutions.
Yeah, for those listening, that phone number for Exterior Home Solutions, that is 865-524-5888. You get a free estimate today by calling 865-524-5888. Big thanks to our friends, Exterior Home Solutions. So we were talking about some veterans and wanting to push youth and all that type of stuff in relations to COVID seniors. A position group for Tennessee that you would just welcome back. Anybody that wants to come back would be that defensive line because you like veterans at that spot, plus you play so many. Austin, you put some notes out on the board the last couple of days about some COVID seniors that might be trending like they're coming back towards Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I think Omar Norman Lott's trending back. Same thing with Big O. I think ultimately Elijah Simmons ends up back. The one that I think is going the more interesting ones is Tyler Barron. Like, I think he exited Neyland thinking he's going pro, and now there's a lot of chatter, including chatter of him going into the transfer portal and playing somewhere else next year. So, that one, will be interesting to just kind of watch how it unfolds and develops. And, I think Bryson Eason will be back. And again, that's a spot where you have, David Hobbs, Tyree Weathersby, like, some of these younger guys that either played this year or would have played had he not got hurt, like Weathersby, they're going to be bulling a china shop in spring practice, wanting to get out there and get going. So, that defensive line spot, Rodney plays a lot of guys, and that helps him. BJ plays a lot of young guys. That helps him. Kind of keeps those younger players hungry, lets them kind of visualize and actually see some success. And I think that those two rooms are better off for it.
Yeah, and I think you also have to consider what do we always talk about in recruiting, or what do we talk about in recruiting? You always think 2 years ahead, right? Like pre-transfer portal, you're always thinking a couple of years ahead. You look at that room, if all those guys come back, Austin, where are you in 25 in that room? Because none of those guys are going to be able to come back after the 24 season. You don't have high school guys. You mentioned a couple, but you don't. I mean, Nathan Robinson's in there, but I mean, it's going to be a big year next year in high school recruiting for the defensive line because they haven't done well in the high school ranks this year in recruiting. And also going to mean that the portal for defensive linemen, I think, after the 24 season is going to be really big for Tennessee because you start thinking 2 years ahead, particularly with all these COVID guys, that 25 roster could have a major turnover. We thought it would be a major turnover in 24, but it may be the major turnover in 25 if a bunch of these guys are coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could be. I mean, the biggest thing, that's why you got to keep bringing some of those younger players along because it doesn't mean the bottom drops out. Like if, what you're describing is, the bottom dropping out and all of a sudden you being left with, the Will Smith, like nobody's here in the room with me anymore.
At the Fresh Prince, right.
You know what I mean?
But you don't want to be in a situation where you go from 7 defensive interior guys to 3, right? Or 7 to 4, or 8 to 4. I mean, that's my point. It's not the bottom dropping out, but your numbers could be really could put you in a really tough spot because of what your signing class looks like right now at the defensive tackle position.
Look at offense, though. Kind of on that note, the bottom can drop out this offseason or maybe next offseason, depending on how many of those guys look to return. I mean, guys who could leave right now, Cooper Mays, Dane Davis, John Campbell, Javonte Spraggins, Gerald Mincey's a redshirt junior. I mean, that's a lot of players. You think you're going to get some of those guys back, right? At least you hope, but say a lot of those guys come back and then next year they all have to leave. There's not, like, at least on the defensive line, you got some young guys that have gotten some PT that you feel good about, that you like. On the offensive line, Austin, those young guys really hadn't seen any action at all.
No, but you got bodies. You just don't know if they can play because you've made that decision. And at least Rodney's made a decision to see where some of his guys are. You've got bodies on the O-line, AP, but you don't know what they can do at this point.
That's correct. I mean, before the last game where Addison Nichols was forced to play because of injury to Cooper, which slid Ollie back to center. I mean, Parker Ball had almost as many snaps as Addison Nichols. And Addison Nichols was your most promising lineman, and now he's, going to be portal bound. You've got Mo Clipper, who has already announced he's going to go to the portal. You've got multiple linemen that to me could still end up there again. Like that's a point of contention for me, just because you're not real deep there. Scheme has allowed you to have success, however, but the wrong or right injury or whatever could really debilitate that room quite a bit.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, I mean, you got a young quarterback next year, so you need those veterans to come back to help him out. But you have got to force feed young linemen into football games when the opportunity presents itself. And this has been my soapbox for 3 years. They don't force feed and put the young guys in there as early as they should.
There you go.
For whatever reason, that hurts and stunts the development of growth of young players. And I think it's more on the offensive side of the ball than it is even on the defense because of what you're talking about, AP, with linebacker and defensive lineman. Now, in the secondary, they haven't done enough of that. But look on the offensive side, right? I mean, it took injury, our fear of guys leaving, to get Caleb Webb and Nimrod on the field against UTSA. They didn't play very much against Virginia or against Austin Peay in those first couple of games. Ethan Davis basically was a factor in one game this year for Tennessee. And that's it. We've talked about the young linemen out there. I think they missed some opportunities to get Nico on the field earlier than what they did get him on the field. I think that's something they have to make a very clear-cut, conscious decision to alter that moving forward for the development of the program and to continue to be upgrading the roster through development.
Yeah, on the defensive side, it's defensive line and linebackers do a really good job of rotating. On the offensive side, it's running backs.
Mm-hmm.
The running backs, they rotate, they get guys in, and so like that, I don't think you see quite the same stunted growth that you see. And they're so thin at receiver this year, they were forced to basically play everybody, right, outside of Nathan Leacock. But in a perfect world, if Tennessee was deeper, I mean, would you have saw Nimrod and Webb? I'm going to go no.
I'll say no.
Well,
we've seen 3 receivers play, 4 last year because of injury. We've seen 3 receivers play typically since Josh Heupel's tenure's been here. And then now, because of the Cedric Tillman injury in 22 and because of Dante Thornton and, of course, Brew McCoy, you had to see it this year. So yeah. I'm with you. I would say probably not. And then at running back this year, you were so loaded. Man, I think we'd all like to see Cam Selden a little bit, but it's like, I mean, there's hardly any snaps for Dylan Sampson who deserves to play. So,
but you did see him though in blowout situations. Cam Selden was able to get into games.
Yeah, they were. I mean, look at the receiver spot. I mean, when they moved Thornton outside, I mean, Caleb Webb's snaps went basically to nothing, right? I mean, and so it's just one of those deals where I think they have to be more mindful of that when the opportunity presents itself. They have got to get those guys in to help them develop and grow moving forward. And I know practice. I mean, you learn on the practice field. And everything. The game reps are game reps, and they're still very they're so valuable. I just think Tennessee can do a better job of that. That's been my soapbox, and I'll stay on it for a while, I'm afraid.
Just saw Ken Seals of Vanderbilt just pop up on that screen. It could be worse. You could have 3 quarterbacks into the portal and be left with nobody at a position, much less the quarterback position.
Well, and I think, Eric, I think and I know you got another topic to get to here, but I think you bring up an interesting point. When we've seen, and Austin jump in here too, you've seen schools like NC State lose 12, 13 players, and you've seen some other places around the country that have lost a whole bunch of players. We had this question on the Rewind Sunday night. What's the over-under on guys going in? and I mean, look, Tennessee they don't have this huge run of guys going in right now. Why? Well, I think people like it here. I think this is a program they enjoy being a part of, which gets back to the challenges for the coaches because Tennessee is not dealing with some of the things that they're dealing with at some other schools. Tennessee's NIL program is solid and sound and has been on the up and up with everybody. So nobody feels like they've been, mistreated there like you've seen at some other places.
Wow.
They have funds to contribute to people, AP. I mean, they're solid in a lot of different places, which is why kids like to be here.
Yeah, not everybody's happy with with what they get paid, but that's at any school, right? I mean, everybody always wants more.
But the point is that's in every profession out there.
Whatever. The biggest thing is, and you've seen this with several schools when kids have not gotten payment. The biggest thing about Tennessee is nobody at Tennessee's failed to get payment. Like whatever they've agreed to put on NIL wise, they've gotten that payment, right? And that's where it's weight in gold. Whereas at a lot of schools, you've seen kids or you hear the stories behind the scenes of kids who, were told they were going to get this and they didn't, and so on and so forth.
So we'll see how this kind of shakes out, not just this week, but over the coming weeks. COVID seniors, what do they elect their decisions to do? How many more defectors could you see from Tennessee's roster? You'll see a couple more for sure, over the week to the transfer portal and all that. Let's go to recruiting here. Signing day is a couple of weeks away. You had Roger Saliapunga that picked Oregon over Tennessee at tight end. You have Jonathan Eccles in this class currently committed. Of course, Tennessee's targeting a couple of transfers from the portal, Austin. But what does Tennessee do at tight end right now, at least at the high school ranks?
Well, I think in a perfect world, you'd love to add 1 from the portal, 2 from the high school ranks. The problem is, I'm not sure that's going to play out that way. We'll see what happens with Cole Harrison, tight end from California. Does he make it out here for an OV in the next week or two? And does Tennessee like to go that route? Tennessee will host Justin Jolie, the UConn tight end who went in the portal on Monday. They'll host him coming up this weekend. He's excited for the game, or for the not the game, but the visit here. Enjoyed the game when Tennessee played UConn.
I'm sure he did.
Up there, during the month of November. And then, Tennessee's going to continue to look at, the young man out of Notre Dame. Holden is a really good player. I guess shared time this past year from Westminster High School down in Atlanta, same high school, the Kansas City kicker, Harrison Butker. Tennessee's, going to try to be in play there. I would say he'll probably visit, whether it be this week or next. Still working on lining some of that stuff up. But the tight end spot's important because Tennessee needs bodies. They have Ethan Davis and Ethan Davis. So, at this point, Rob's not on this podcast. It may be because he's trying to bulk up and give it a run to play tight end for the Vols.
I like, the Jolie kid everybody saw, so Tennessee fans are certainly in love with him because of what he did in Neyland Stadium. I do like the fact that he's got multiple years of eligibility back.
Yeah, both do. Notre Dame get too.
Both those guys. And I think that's important. I'm not saying you don't go get a grad transfer, but if you can get a guy with multiple years, what you're trying to do, to me, assuming those guys aren't going to go pro after 1 year here at Tennessee, Austin, I think you're trying to get something to where you're not in this same cycle every year at that position, where you are in a paramount must-have get at that position because you just don't have enough bodies to line up, which was the case this past year, which is why they went and got Castles, who turned out fine for Tennessee. He did a good job, but you want to get a multi-year guy, to me, if you can get that, to build a little depth and start to develop that room a little bit.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you'd love to bring in 2, but I just don't think that's possible. Because, ultimately, you love Ethan Davis. You think he is the star at the position, the next bright star at the tight end spot at Tennessee. And that's how the staff thinks of him. If you bring 2 guys in, does it rock the boat with a guy like that? I think that's something you have to think about when you're talking about managing the roster. And Hubs, you were talking about that earlier.
That's right.
That's something you have to think about. You bring in 2 players that are going to come in and expect to play. It's the same reason I asked the person on the board on Monday, what possesses you to ask about Dylan Gabriel? I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but Dylan Gabriel wants to play. Everybody wants Nico. This is Nico's show. You're not going to get a Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel's not coming here to sit. So, same thing here. These players, coming from Notre Dame and UConn aren't transferring to watch from the sidelines. And Ethan Davis isn't planning on watching from the sidelines either. So, there's only so many spots to go around, which is why I say 1 transfer. And if you could get 2 high school kids, that would be ideal. I'm just not sure.
I agree with you 100%. It's the same answer I had for somebody on the board, Eric, about the linebacker position. They were talking about taking a transfer linebacker. If Keenan Peely's back, which we believe he's going to come back, you're done at linebacker because you don't want to rock that boat with those young guys and their development and where they are and have those guys leave. Again, you got to be thinking 2 years down the road. Fans don't, but everybody in that building has to be thinking 2 years. You can't just think this immediate moment, put your blinders on and get lost in the forest for 12 games next year, because you got to think about what your roster is going to look like in 25. You don't want to have a turnover of 30 or 40 guys every year. You've got to be in a situation where you've got some depth that you can develop from that standpoint.
If you think Nico is who you think he is, right? You want to surround him, and this goes defensively too, but you want to surround him with as many quality players as you can.
Yeah. I agree with that, but not at the standpoint that a bunch of young players you think are going to be quality players aren't going to be here for you in 25.
No. That's my point, though, is you got to think about Nico. Okay, he's the starter next year, but he's also the starter in 25. I'm backing your point up. Like you want guys that can be here with Nico for more than just 1 year.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you.
I got you. Okay. I wasn't confused.
Like back to linebacker. I mean, if Keenan Peely returns, I mean that's your transfer. I mean, he played one game for you. It's essentially rinse repeat. That's your transfer you're getting in. Your old guy in the room. And if I'm fans, man, I'm excited to see Jeremiah Telander, Arian Carter play some more. Let's see what Jalen Smith can do. He's going to redshirt this year. Jordan Burns coming in. I mean, you got some talent in that room, and they played, and you got to see, how good can they be this time next year. So you pair that with a veteran in Keenan Peely, who you want to stay healthy. You feel pretty good about that spot. Transfer portal window officially open. We'll continue to track it. So we got the transfer portal tracker up on the site. You can see who Tennessee's interested in, who Tennessee's offered, what players from the current roster have left, all that and more. Do want to end the show right now and knowing that at the time of this recording, things can always change. But interest level, how real is it? We've talked about it on the board a little bit, but AP, MTSU is looking for a head coach, and we've seen two names that currently are on Tennessee staff kind of be linked to that. I think Tim Banks is more real than Jerry Mack, but at the time of this recording, how real do you think that could be?
I think it's very real. I think it's very real with Tim Banks and MTSU. Jerry Mack never talked to MTSU, so I think people just threw his name out there, but he actually never spoke with anybody at MTSU. But Tim Banks, Hubbard, I believe, is someone that has a lot of interest from the Blue Raiders.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the question is, where does Tim Banks feel like the job would be, the opportunity? Is it a situation where you can go in there and be successful, or is it a situation where you don't think it's a job that presents opportunities for success? Where are they with their commitment to football? Where are they financially with that commitment? What would your staff budget look like? I mean, when you're going into those head coaching situations, particularly your first time, you want to get off on a place that gives you a real chance to win. And I think that's where I'm impressed with a guy like Jamie Chadwell, right? And some of these guys that are very calculating in their moves in what they do. They don't just jump on the first thing to put themselves in a situation that, hey, I've stunted my opportunity as a head coach. And I think that's something you have to look at if you're Tim Banks, and you have to be mindful of. I mean, one of the things that attracted Alex Golesh to South Florida was the facility commitment that they made. Now, they've got to get their NIL, and there's still some things. But at the level they're playing at, their input in football with creating their own stadium and creating their own brand down there showed Alex Golesh they're all in for football, that they're in to make that place better and to get it to where they want to get it to. Where is MTSU at from that financial commitment? I think is a question that if I'm Tim Banks, I'm doing a ton of research on before I go down that road if that job offer is presented to me.
Something else to track over the crazy month of December, the first couple of weeks of December, and we got it all for you right here at Volquest.com. Appreciate you guys for listening to us. This is the Exterior Home Solutions Volquest podcast. Give them a call today for a free estimate, 865-524-5888. They're local. They're trusted since 1999. Exterior Home Solutions. A big thank you to them. For Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, I'm Eric Kane. Thanks so much for listening to us here on the Volquest Podcast.